And welcome to tonight's edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I'm your co-host Kahari Mosley here with my illustrious co-host Miracle Jones. How you doing, Miracle?
I am doing well, not really looking forward to this inclement weather event that we're about to have here in Pittsburgh, but I am doing well. How are you, Kahari? Was your weekend?
Doing pretty well. Very, very action-packed end of last week into the weekend. We had Netroots Nation in town, and we were very much involved with a lot of the activities going on, from plenaries to various panels. It was a great weekend. Super shout out to the folks from Netroots, Mary Rickles, and the whole team for coming to Pittsburgh and having a great, great event. Miracle, is there any highlights from the weekend that you'd like to share?
I mean, it was a busy weekend. I know for many, they're happy because it was the return of Steelers football. But like I said, here for like grassroots organizing, our pregame, I guess, was this Netroots conference where we talked about a variety of issues from organizing to building coalitions to creating partnerships as well. There was so much happening this weekend, the Harambe Festival. We want to always show love to the folks who actually put the Harambe Festival over in East Liberty, which was down the street from our office. In addition, there was also the community back to school event because today was the first day of school for many Pittsburgh students. So we also want to give love, support for all the parents who are happy that their students are returning to school, but also want to raise up the teachers, the staff, the administrators who are doing all they can to make sure our students have a great, happy, healthy, safe return to school. And we know that this is a very tough time because some parents woke up across the country and found out that classes were going to be canceled because their teachers were striking. And so we want to again send solidarity to the teachers, some of the teachers who are striking across the country this week, as they hope to get better contracts, even here locally. One university at Point Park, some of the teachers are going through contract negotiations, and they are protesting and organizing as it's been students returning, move-in day. And so there's a lot going on within the realm of education. So again, it's going to be a pretty difficult return for some students, but we're hoping everyone had a great first day back. Back to you, Gary.
Thanks for that, Miracle. Yeah, it definitely was a great event. The first time back in Pittsburgh in a little over a decade for Netroots Nation. And, I really had a great experience spending some time with Sarah Innamorato, State Senator Lindsey Williams, as well as State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta on an opening night plenary session, discussing the progressive future, in state politics and state government, and some of the incredible work that they're doing in Harrisburg and how they're changing the culture in Harrisburg, in the state capital, and in the work that they plan to do moving into the future. So that was a great experience, as well as the panel I was on with the brand new Payback Coalition that we are working with to ensure corporate accountability and to address the disproportionate impact that big money has in our political system. So those were, two highlights for me from the weekend of events. It was definitely a lot of great networking. Got to run into a lot of people I haven't seen in several years when I used to do a lot more national work. So yeah, it was a really really great event, and really glad that they came to Pittsburgh, and hope that the folks when they were in town had a great time. But moving to what is becoming nearer and nearer, which is the election. We are 78 days out of the general election that will be on November 8th. And there's a recent poll that came out by the Trafalgar Group that has a little bit closer Senate race than most of the other polls have suggested. This recent poll that came out today has Fetterman at a 48 to 43% lead, which is a lot closer than some of the double-digit leads that we've seen Fetterman have in recent polling. So it suggests that there may be a tightening, which usually happens, as we get closer to the election. Folks that generally vote Republican that are undecided go that way, and folks who generally vote Democrat that are undecided, go vote for the Democrats. So we'll see the undecideds, begin to make their choices over these next 78 days as we decide who will be the next senator from the state of Pennsylvania. But obviously, there's also a race for governor, and lieutenant governor, state house, and state senate, and recently, the very controversial Doug Mastriano, the Republican nominee for governor, was in town on the same day that Ned Roots was in town, and Ron DeSantis, rather, the governor of Florida, was also in town. Miracle, you have any reports from the activities that surrounded this intersection of activities from Ned Roots Nation to Doug Mastriano and Ron DeSantis coming to town?
Yes, actually, our last guest, Blair Mickels from the Women's March Pittsburgh, is actually going to be joining us a little bit later to talk about organizing the response when that campaign showed up and the reasons why. As we know, Pennsylvania is a swing state for the national election. And so there are going to be people from every single party coming through Pittsburgh. People forget Pittsburgh is one of the largest counties here in Pennsylvania. It also hosts the largest demographic of voters within the county for both conservative and progressive voters. In addition, there are multiple party candidates running here in Pennsylvania, so it's not a close as race as many people would think. And some of the issues and impacting Pennsylvania's, of course, is student loan debt. And we know this week is allegedly the week that the Biden administration is going to make an announcement about their policies regarding student loan forgiveness or cancellation or delays, depending on what they have deemed to be their platform this year. And so there are a lot of issues that are going to impact the ballot. Of course, we know fracking is a big divisive issue, as well as community investments. We just had a budget here in Pennsylvania, as well as a couple of acts on the federal side that is going to see a lot of changes. But again, some of these changes are not going to take place for another 2 to 4 years. So we're going to be seeing what voters decide come November. But some cool things that are going to be happening in the interim is that we have a county council meeting, a city council meeting this week for people to start to engage the council members about what to do for elections. We know that City Councilman Bobby Wilson has been introducing a lot of legislation to respond to the national crises to make sure that Pittsburgh is kind of insulated from some of the impacts. We also know that there's the issue around housing affordability and stabilization. And so there are a lot of issues impacting voters this cycle that Pennsylvania, but particularly Pittsburgh, is going to be a part of the national conversation, which is going to be a lot different. And so that's why we have some of the guests coming on today just to talk about the issues surrounding this region, how it reflects some of the national dialogue, but also how we differ for some of our responses. So it's going to be a very interesting, next few weeks as we kind of get closer and closer to November. So to remind people to take care of yourself, to take care of your families, do not become too overwhelmed with the political ads, because again, we're all in this together and we all have to, work to make sure our cities and our communities are those that reflect our values. So back to you, Kahari.
Thank you for that. And jumping back into polling, we just mentioned the recent results from the Trafalgar group having a closer race as my dog, Sasha, gets into the shot as well. I guess she wants to hang out for a little bit this evening as well. It showed that the race is also tightening for governor. We have Josh Shapiro up 48-44 over Doug Mastriano. This is the closest the race has been in any poll taken since June. So it definitely appears that as we get closer to Labor Day, not only on the Senate side but also on the gubernatorial side, we will see these races tighten a lot closer than some of the very large leads we've seen over the summer. And also the Commonwealth Court recently ruled that the undated mail ballots should be counted. Commonwealth Court President Judge Reneen Cohn Jubileer denied the preliminary objections of Berks, Fayette, and Lancaster County Boards of Elections and directed them to certify the primary election races no later than Wednesday, August 24th. Judge Jubileer wrote that the lack of a handwritten date on the declaration of a return envelope on a timely received absentee or mail ballot does not support excluding those ballots from board certified results under both Pennsylvania law and Section 101A-2B of the Civil Rights Act. So that's very, interesting. This is an issue that's come up. It came up, very much during the Republican primary between Dave McCormick and Dr. Oz, where many on the Republican side were opposing counting these ballots. But I think it was something that would have helped, Dave McCormick's campaign. But it looked as though it would be kind of hypocritical since the party line, since the 2020 election would be to not count these undated ballots. But it appears that Commonwealth Court has ruled that these ballots will be counted, and maybe someone will appeal it to the state Supreme Court. But for now, undated mail ballots will be counted. Back to you, Miracle.
And we know for some reason, the mail-in ballots continue to be an issue here in Pennsylvania almost over 3 years later since Act 77. So again, reminder for those, if you are going to vote by mail, please, please, please sign and date every single signature and date line on your ballots, on your envelopes. Things are subject to change as these are rulings, and these rulings are making their way up through the courts, with the ending result to be the Supreme Court of the United States. So you want to make sure you're doing everything that you can to ensure that your ballot is not rejected or put aside in a pile to have a court approve or reject later. And we know that just a couple of weeks ago, the Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania upheld mail-in voting. So that will happen for this election cycle, and we'll be doing some engagement, some education around what mail-in voting means, because there has been some changes. But again, it's very important that if you're going to vote by mail this election cycle, that you make sure you sign and date your ballots, because there is no guarantee that next election, any ballot that people forgot to sign will still be counted. And so we're very excited to have our guest panel this evening to talk about a host of issues regarding what's going on here in Pennsylvania as well. But we'll just, for our viewers, we are experiencing, some thunderstorms. So we do apologize in advance for any technical difficulties that may arise during the rest of the broadcast. But we're very excited to talk with our panelists this evening about a host of events, and also talk about ways that you can get involved this year or any year to make sure this region is a little bit better for all of us. And I'll turn it to Kahari to wrap up our current news.
Thanks again, Miracle. I think just the thunders is starting to bother my dog a little bit. So for those with canines in the home, can understand the anxiety that the thunder sometimes creates with our canine friends. So hopefully Sasha will stay quiet in the background for now, but at the same time, I am hoping for her well-being. Yes, so we are 78 days from the election. Last week, as we mentioned on last week's show, the Inflation Reduction Act, was passed and signed by President Biden. One of the largest environmental pieces of legislation in history, but also dealing with taxes, as well as environmental issues, as well as healthcare issues as well. So it is definitely, the signature piece of legislation so far in the Biden administration. Administration that seems to be doing a lot better than it was several months ago. Polling suggests that the Democrats' hopes to not fall into the minority, may not be a fool's errand, as many had thought earlier in the calendar year. But Democrats seem to have a much better opportunity to maintain the majority than they did several months ago, as prices continue to go down, particularly gas prices, as well as a key legislative victory this summer. I think that rounds out all of the major political updates we have as of now. And, we look forward to a big fall. So Miracle, can you tell us about all the wonderful guests we have on tonight's episode of the Power Hour?
Yes, like Kahari said, there was a large, the biggest and most significant piece of environmental legislation was just signed into law. But as we know, that is going to take a little bit to be implemented for us to see changes. But what has been happening here in the Pittsburgh region, there has been some adverse weather impacts that have resulted in people making complaints about the air quality and the presence of particulates and smells within the region that make it inhabitable for them to go outside to play, games. In the Mon Valley area, there's a significant amount of individuals who are suffering from asthma and other respiratory illnesses based on the environmental impacts in those regions. And so our first two guests are going to talk a little bit about what people can do around, environmental concerns. Then our next guest is going to be Joshua Friedman from Ben the Arc Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, Pittsburgh is no stranger to hate and bigotry. And over the weekend, there's been some reports that Representative Frankel, who is a Jewish elected representative in this area, has been the subject of some vile anti-Semitic targeting online. And so Joshua is going to join us to talk about how this is a reflection of what's going on this political cycle and the things that we can do to combat that and fight back against anti-Semitism. And then we'll wrap up with Blair Mickels from Women March Pittsburgh, who's going to talk about the action that happened last weekend, but also how people can get involved going forward to make sure that as people come to Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, that their messaging is something that represents the values of the people and that is not divisive to the voting electorate. So we want to take this time to welcome our first guest who come to us from GASP PGH, which is an organization that is working as a collective to fight back against smog and pollutants. So we want to welcome to the Power Hour, Ned and Patrick. Welcome, both of you.
Yeah, thanks, Miracle. It's great that we're here. I appreciate you inviting us on.
Ditto. Yeah. Thank you very much.
And so can you just start off, I'll come to you, Patrick, then you, Ned. Can you just talk a little bit about the history of GAS, as it is affectionately called here in Pittsburgh, and why it's so important that organizations like yours are here in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So GASP stands for the Group Against Smog and Pollution. And our organization was founded in 1969 around kitchen tables and in living rooms because family, friends, and neighbors were getting sick. Most everyone knew that major industries like steelmaking and other heavy industries like that were to blame from pumping out astronomically high tons of air pollutants every year. And so the original members of GASP organized scientists and doctors and educators to work with residents to advocate for healthy air in Pittsburgh and in the region. And since those days, GASP has worked continuously to protect the areas and regions' air quality through education, holding regulators and operators accountable, and policy development as well. That's really the core of our work. That's the mission of our organization. And so nowadays, you'll see us working with residents, educating elected officials and their staffs regarding air quality regulations. You'll see us working with high school students in our Fresh Voices project and elevating and centering stories of resiliency from people living in the Mon Valley through an upcoming podcast project.
And then coming to you, Ned, I know some people always freak out when they look on their iPhones and they see that air quality, alert on the weather app. And we know last week there was an alert that went out warning people that there was something going on in the air. Can you just talk about what goes into those alerts and why it's so important that people pay attention to those?
Yeah, the air quality changes through the day to day, might linger for a while. A lot of the history of Pittsburgh being an air quality problem has to do with these hills and valleys, these river valleys. Pollution can get trapped overnight, maybe when air is stagnant, or maybe ozone will form later in the day if it's really hot, sunny. So those alerts come out, and the health department and the DEP, through their monitoring, learn that it's not ideal to be breathing the air. I say that because it's not, those alerts aren't that people will start dropping like flies, but it's that we have a lot of defenses. People have a lot of defenses to all sorts of pollution in the air. And those alerts come out when people should take care to reduce maybe consider changing their schedule for the day, especially if they're in a vulnerable community, people who have asthma, who have COPD, who have heart disease or other pre-existing conditions, that those alerts should help guide people's activities to try to stay safe, to be healthy, or to avoid what might be a temporary condition.
Thank you. And I saw recently that the Allegheny Health Department released an inaugural um, air quality annual report. Started with Patrick and then with Ned. Can you talk a little bit about that report and what role GAS may have had in developing it, and what are some of the key findings in that report?
Yeah, that report was completely developed by the Allegheny County Health Department, their air quality program. And so, as you mentioned, it is their inaugural report. And so whenever we were looking into and analyzing that report, we found that there truly was a lot of helpful information within this inaugural report. They did a good job breaking down the different types of programs that the air quality program will undergo, things like monitoring. They did a good job at trying to be more transparent about what their projects are, what their priorities are, and acknowledging that while yes, air quality has improved over the decades, there is still so much more work that needs to be done to improve air quality with the core goal of protecting public health. And so we saw this annual report as a good first step in order to better communicate with the residents of Allegheny County about air quality.
And Ned, do you have any other additional things to add about the air quality report?
Just to echo Patrick's points on it being a very good first step. And the reason we say first step is because there's a history of some of these reports being very technical. We enjoyed a period of 14 micrograms per cubic meter of particulate matter. That, to many communities, is white noise. It's not helpful. It's not useful. So we've been advocating for that. I think a lot of groups have been advocating for the health department to really engage with the most affected communities in ways that are helpful to them, in language that they can understand, in giving them tools or giving them insights that help them protect their own health, rather than just, well, here's a list of numbers, have at it. So I think that's the big benefit of the most recent report.
And now you talked about some of those tools and resources for people who are living in impacted areas, sometimes people maybe new to the area. How do they go about reporting situations? I know some people have their own testing equipment in their homes and in their yards. How do people go about reporting instances of what they perceive as to be negative air quality?
So, I'll leave a reporting question to Patrick. He knows a little bit more about that system, but just briefly about the tools that, well, Patrick, you just want to go ahead and take the reporting question? I'm sorry, I don't know if I have the right answer for this point.
Yeah, sure. That's okay if it's okay with Miracle and Kari. Thanks for the flexibility. So the health department uses a third-party system on their website called GovQA. And so that system is one that a resident can go onto their website and create an account, and will be able to file complaints to the health department and some other departments within the Allegheny County system. And so they are, so you're able to go to that site, file a complaint whenever, for example, you may see a particular heavy plume of smoke coming from the Clarendon Coke Works, or you may smell something that is incredibly that the air just stinks, and you want a government official to know what is what's happening. And so you can file these complaints through their GovQA system. typically they will, you'll have an ID number that's generated from that system. So you'll be able to see if anyone in the health department does follow up with your complaint, and then the health department is able to respond to your complaint through that system. This, of course, is the edge here. The challenge here is it potentially cuts out a large number of people because not everybody has the internet or access to a smartphone that can connect them to the internet. And so there is a phone number that you can call at the health department. And I believe I shared that with you all in the chat, but that number is just simply 412-350-4636. And you're able to communicate a complaint to the health department that way. Though it does make follow-up a little more challenging, of course, because you're dependent upon calling.
Thank you for that. And so coming to you, Ned, I know a part of GASP is to use the legal, movement arm of the law to push for environmental changes. So how do you go about using the law? And is there anything that we need to be looking forward coming to GASP from you in this regards in the future?
This is the point where the law and public health come together, and it's a very messy relationship. There are laws that affect individual sites, or there are laws that affect ambient air quality for certain things, but there really aren't great laws that protect broadly across all communities, all people that are vulnerable, all people that are affected by air pollution. So one of the things we say is that getting involved in the political process is very important. That there are the Allegheny County, the county level government is actually how air quality is managed around Pittsburgh. DEP has some management oversight over certain environmental issues. The Environmental Justice Index for people to sort of be aware and advocate in their own communities, and when these questions come up, it's a new tool that the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, created to really help people see the intersection of where people's health, social factors like unemployment, like education, and environmental burden all come together to really affect a community adversely. And so the legal tools we do some work on very technical review of the laws, but it's a political process as well, or it's citizens being empowered, taking advantage of the tools that are out there, and getting involved in the process. These rules are made in somewhat opaque, or they're not always elected officials that are making these decisions. There's these agencies, there are meetings that happen, and getting engaged in a DEP Air Technical Advisory Committee meeting on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. or ACH or a county subcommittee hearing on health and environment. Those things are very important, that people's voices be heard. And that will lead to the sorts of laws, I think, that will give people the voice and the legal leverage they need to actually force a few things toward better situation.
Thank you for that. And in a previous comment a few minutes ago, you brought up environmental justice, which is an issue very important to us as an organization and many within our constituency. Do either of you see any particular issue or anything currently happening in the greater Pittsburgh area that specifically kind of speaks to the importance of addressing environmental justice concerns in particular?
Yeah, that's, I think the challenge is most of what we see and where we work deals with environmental justice communities. places like Clarendon and Braddock, and those that exist in the Mon Valley, where residents have just been burdened with air pollution and water pollution and soil contamination for for decades, for generations of families. And so we spend most of our time working on making comments and trying to address the deficits that exist within the potential deficits that exist within permits, so that they are protective of public health. That way, operators are using the most effective technology to limit emissions going into the air. So that's what we continually see.
Thank you for that. And as we wrap, can you talk about how people can get in contact with you? I know you said you have a podcast and some other things coming down. We want to make sure people are able to follow up and reach out to you.
Yeah, thank you. That's you can always go to our website, which is GASP-PGH.org. You'll find all sorts of great educational resources there. In particular, the plain language guide to understanding local air quality is a great start to really help us get our heads around air quality. And there you can also find ways to comment, issue your own comments on permits. We also have guides on how to do that on a permit by permit basis. We keep a great resource of upcoming public hearings and public meetings. That way you can show up and make your voice heard. Because I think Ned hinted at it earlier, and certainly your work collectively just demonstrates the power when communities come together to advocate for more just systems. And air quality is an essential part of that.
Well, Ned and Patrick, thank you both so much for joining us for the Power Hour. I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and the storm is not too bad for either one of y'all.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It was great
so much.
spending this time with you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And as we move to our next guest, we know, like I said, this is election year. And unfortunately, the elections bring out the best, but sometimes the worst in people. And this weekend, some stories broke about how some things on the internet directed at a local politician because of his religion, his ethnicity. It really stirred up a lot of negative feelings for some folks. And we wanted to reach out to those in the community, just talk about what this means, what they're seeing on the ground. And so for our next guest from Bend the Arc, we want to welcome to the Power Hour, Joshua Friedman. So welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Miracle and Kari. It's good to see you here.
Welcome.
So last week, Representative Dan Frankel, who happens to be my state representative in Harrisburg, received some threats on Gab, anti-Semitic threats. And I think it's safe to say that we're seeing an uptick in threats against all sorts of people for whatever reason on, I don't even think they're fringe platforms anymore. They're moving into the mainstream. And what I think that's one of the unfortunate results of the really vitriolic political rhetoric is that these ideas are mainstreamed. These ideas are acceptable to certain segments of society. We lived for, at least segments of society lived for years without these things being acceptable. It's really scary to see. In my research and seeing what sort of coverage there had been about Frankel's response, about what else is going on in in this situation, I actually came across a story of Lee Zeldin, who's running for governor in New York. He is a Republican, and he's also receiving anti-Semitic threats, which I don't actually think is surprising. This has been some of the dialogue that we've had internally at Bend the Arc, that 2016, 2017, we saw this as a growing tide. And this is coming to fruition. It's not only progressive Jewish liberals who are outspoken against white supremacy, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia. It's coming for everybody. If you're not part of the hegemony that's in power, the right-wing, white, Christian, conservative hegemony, it will come for you. Frankel's response, I think, was the right response, that he's doubling down on Gab is a problem, this rhetoric is a problem, that cultivating that culture is dangerous for all of us. It's not just dangerous for me as a Jew, but it's dangerous to my neighbor who is Black, and it's dangerous to my neighbor who is LGBT. It's dangerous to my neighbor who's a woman. It's dangerous to everybody. If you're not part of that hegemony, then you're in danger.
Mhm. And you said you've been having some of these internal conversations for people who are not part of Bend the Arc, or are not who do not identify as Jewish. What are some of the things that we could be doing to fight back and combat this rise of anti-Semitism?
I think what we're doing right now is part of it. I think a lot of it is solidarity work, and we've really leaned into, I think that's been a driving force for us, is that these aren't separate communities. We all live in Pittsburgh. We all live in Pennsylvania. We all live in the United States, and we all are enclosed on the one planet that will support us. So solidarity work, having these conversations, getting to know people, that's often a way around or a way through possible divisiveness, possible hateful situations. Building community, getting to know people, I think that really breaks down barriers, making it unacceptable to not be part of your community, making it unacceptable to have these views again. There's a very long time where you couldn't say these things openly. They were behind closed doors. And now that, while that's still not great, that game is over. It's okay to say racist things in many spheres. It's okay to say anti-Semitic things in many spheres. You could run down the entire list.
And Josh, you mentioned, earlier that, you didn't want to refer to these groups as fringe, but they've become, somewhat, mainstream. Do you feel as though, this bigotry that, at least it seems for many, many years, kind of lived in the shadows, kind of lived in the crevices of the internet and parts of society, is it our imagination, or is it something that is becoming more prominent over the past several years? From your perspective, do you see that this is on the uptick, or is it just it's being exposed in ways we just weren't aware of before?
That's an interesting question, and that's something that I think about all the time. I think because of social media and because of the internet, we're exposed to lots of things that we didn't know was going on. But I also think because of the accessibility to these ideas, accessibility to communities that want to spread these ideas, that it is more mainstream. And the thing that I want to point to right now is what Representative Frankel pointed to, is that the individual, Doug Mastriano, who's running for governor of one of the 50 states in the United States, there are only 50 of these people in the country. He is running for that position, and he paid $5,000 to promote his views on Gab, which is one of these white supremacist outlets. And then he comes out and says that he's not anti-Semitic. That's not. It keeps coming back to the James Baldwin quote for me. I don't. I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm not going to get it quite right. But I don't need to hear what you say. I see what you do.
And so we know election years are sometimes the most contentious times for some folks, and it's also some of the most combative times for people. So I know Ben the Arc is involved in a lot of these spaces. So what are some of the campaigns that you're working on to bring people together, to educate people not only about anti-Semitism, but other inequities in the world, so that hopefully 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people aren't spewing this hateful rhetoric because we're all more bonded together?
So we're working on 3 campaigns right now. One of them is the election. So we're working on, because of election rules, we're only able to work on the Senate race and the House race in DC. So we're working for John Fetterman and we're working for Summerlee to bring them to Washington and represent us in Washington, because out of all the people running, they will best represent us. And like Jasiri said on Friday, when we were gathered at the corner of 10th and Penn on our way to protest Mastriano, even when we get our candidates in their positions in wherever we've elected them to, we still need to hold them accountable. That's an important component in building the world that we see as the most just world. That's campaign number 1. Campaign number 2 is the Drop Colcom campaign. That's headed up by the Thomas Merton Center. And for those of you that don't know, hopefully I can run through this really quickly. It's a little bit complicated. There's a foundation called the Colcom Foundation. It comes from old Mellon Scaife money, and outwardly it's an environmental sustainability organization. You look at the organizations they support, and about 80% are really great organizations that we love in Pittsburgh that do great things on an everyday basis, and 20% sound kind of fishy. And those organizations are, some of them have been named, they're immigration organizations. I should use quotes around immigration. They are looking to limit immigration to the United States. So that's about 20% of the organizations named, some of them named as hate organizations by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And then when you go and look at the books, those 80% of organizations that we love are getting 20% of the money. And those 20% of organizations that are hate groups are getting 80% of the money. So it's significant greenwashing. The Drop Colcom campaign is, and I'm not the best person equipped within Ben the Arc to talk about this, but I'm doing my best, is trying to get those organizations that we love to drop Colcom. Don't take their money anymore. Don't let them use them. Don't let the organizations use them, like Colcom use them as cover. There's also been, I think there's been a move to get Colcom to start putting more money into the great organizations, and for Colcom to drop the hate groups that they support. The third campaign, which I've been much more involved with, is the End Cash Bail campaign, run through the Alliance for Police Accountability and their coalition. And we want to end cash bail. Cash bail is it keeps people in jail, in Allegheny County Jail, which we know is a very dangerous place for everybody. It Yeah, I really should be better at talking about this with the amount of time I've spent on it. Um, Ending cash bail is important because it keeps people out of poverty. It allows people, even if you're accused of committing a crime, you can still continue your life. You can still continue to support your family. You can still continue to pay your rent and go to work, and you're not penalized for not being able to pay a punitive bail. So we're working on a few angles to end cash bail in the city of Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County. It's been successful in other places in the United States, and we need to bring it to our community.
Thank you for that. Is there any other key issues? I know we covered a lot of very important issues, but is there any other key issues that Ben the Arc is addressing here in the greater Pittsburgh area that you want to highlight before we move on to our next guest?
We've been trying to keep our energy focused so we can maintain our capacity and get our work done and be there for our partners. So we're trying to be really diligent about keeping it to those three causes, which is really hard because there's so much great stuff out there. It's nice to be able to share space with GASP and the Women's March and with you all. And there's so much work to do. And I think we all need to find that work for ourselves and know that we have friends in other spaces that are doing the other work that we can't get to.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as we wrap, can you just talk about how we can get in contact with you? And is there any way that we and other people can support Ben the Arc and other community members? I know it's always stressful to wake up and to be targeted and to see hate, even if it's on social media, even if it's not targeted directly at you. It takes a lot to have to view that ignorance and bigotry. So how can we show up and support you as well?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, keep having these conversations. Keep spreading the word that this is not okay. Go out and elect the better choice. Josh Shapiro is a much better choice than Doug Mastriano because Doug Mastriano is going to keep allowing that hate to spread. Yeah, keep showing up in the streets. We're gonna march shoulder to shoulder until we're all liberated. I think, yeah, show up. I think that might be those my 2 words to leave on. And thank you.
Thank you as well. We put the link to get in contact with Ben the Arc in the chat. So I want to thank you so much, Josh, for taking your Monday out to talk with us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you again.
Thanks so much, Josh.
And so, like he mentioned, there was a rally and a protest that happened last week because of some of the comments and the rhetoric that's being used in this current gubernatorial campaign. And one of the lead organizers, Blair Mickels from the Women's March, is going to be joining us now to talk about what went into that rally and what inspired her to come out and to organize. So welcome to the Power Hour, Blair.
Oh, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a busy Monday evening, but you were one of the lead organizers in this, PA Defense Democracy rally. What caused you to say, I need to go out there, spend my evening just making sure people know that these values aren't representative of us all in Pittsburgh?
Quite frankly, when we found out that not only was Mastriano coming to our neighborhood, but also bringing DeSantis along with him, we realized we can't stand for that here in Pittsburgh. Mastriano has caused enough trouble here in Pittsburgh already through his rhetoric, as Josh had kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. And also, we want to show that we are going to stand up for the women of Pittsburgh and beyond.
And so, what went into planning this rally? Because we know that the information was dropped on social media, and a lot of people didn't know that this was even happening. So, you just talk a little bit what went into that, and what was the message that you were trying to share?
What went into it was kind of like you said, it might have been a little bit of a scramble. A lot of people were saying, wait, he's coming. What are we going to do about it? Because we definitely want to get the message out. I guess the message that we wanted people to take away is that we are able to stand up, fight back against people that want to impose their restrictive policies on the whole statewide, whether it be abortion rights, whether it be education, whether it be any issue that affects our civil and basic human rights, along with, especially the Women's March does represent women, which is all types of women, femmes, trans women, LGBT women, immigrant women, if you're a woman or identify as femme. And we have our allies that also represent us as well. So what we really wanted to do was show that all of those groups, anybody that has a womb or identifies as femme, all of us are under attack. And we wanted to let people know that we are going to stand with you. We are going to fight for you. We are not going to allow this person to come into our neighborhood and gain traction here in Pittsburgh. That's just completely unacceptable. And we wanted to bring a little bit more attention to some of the divisiveness that he has been spewing along his campaign.
Thank you for that. And there's been, obviously some of, the troubling associations and troubling comments, in the past, and troubling positions that Mr. Mastriano has taken. Is there any particular thing that troubles you the most that you want to lift up for those who may not watch MSNBC every night or CNN and haven't been following? Because I know in the national news, I would say of all the gubernatorial nominees of either party, I feel like every time I turn on national news, there's coverage of Doug Mastriano. He's really risen, to the forefront of one of the most covered, candidates in the race, even though many times his campaign really doesn't welcome the media into the events. But is there some stuff that may have not been covered yet, but in the work that you're in, your activism and research, have you found most troubling that you would like to lift up for our viewers?
On behalf of the Women's March, definitely the women's rights, reproductive rights, is something that is at the forefront of a lot of what we do. That is something that I actually, after the rally, someone that attended the event came over and um, kind of was a little angsty when she approached us, but then we ended up having a decent discussion and so forth about women's rights because she was feeling oppressed as a woman, and that was a great opportunity to inform women that we are a nonpartisan organization. However, the values that we promote and follow tend to align more with one particular aspect of political parties, even though we are nonpartisan. So I will go ahead and put that out. So it was wonderful to engage someone that had been supporting Mastriano and kind of realize, hey, wait a minute, this is not for me. But also a lot of the other issues, she was completely unaware about abortion being absolute no and didn't necessarily understand reasons that a woman might need or want or just straight up want an abortion, because it should not be out of necessity, because abortion is healthcare. But some of the other issues that I personally have, I for sure am vehemently against his brand of Christianity. For someone to want to impose a religion on someone, I have friends that span all types of religious backgrounds and everything. So to say we are all going to be Christian nationals, which is basically code word for New Age Nazis in my book, that's dangerous. That's, very problematic. And then lastly, the January 6th insurrection. That is something that still to this day does not sit right with me. I as many people or some people know, I am a veteran. I've deployed overseas. I've served in Afghanistan and other countries throughout the world and so forth. So to have somebody that also wore the same uniform that I wore and then went over, worked overseas, said that, hey, I don't really care about civilian casualties in a paper that he wrote and so forth. It really bothers me to see a fellow veteran that would actually go against our oath of enlistment or his oath of a commissioned officer because he was commissioned. It hurt me, and it still hurts me to this day to think that somebody can actually go against this Constitution that we fought for and expect us to be okay with it and just assume that everything, just assume that we will support him blindly.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's always interesting because I know you always try to make sure you bring the perspective that of veterans, because a lot of times people have this false notion that all veterans think the same, and all veterans are more to one party than another. So I do appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your perspective. And can you just talk a little bit about how people can learn more about the Women's March, how they can volunteer? And is there any more upcoming actions that you are planning that you would like to publicly talk about?
Yes, absolutely. So the best way to get involved are we don't we are a small group of Black women that lead the Women's March, and we do it in addition to our daily lives. But we are probably most active on Facebook, along with our website. We do have a Women's March Pittsburgh website, and on our Facebook page, you will see a lot of our upcoming events. Sometimes they're posted within 48 hours of an event, like this most recent one was. But we do have this Friday coming up at 5:30 at the Riverfront Park in Millvale. We have a rally for our rights, along with other organizations standing for constitutional rights, reproductive rights, the rights of LGBTQIA plus people, Black and brown people, and basically everyone. It says Women's March, but we really do stand up for everyone that is not the white, cis, het, Christian male. But we support their rights too, to have their rights, but we also stand up for that equality for others that are not afforded those same privileges. And then we also have another event coming up, which is, I believe it is September 11th. We will actually be in Johnstown, which is another rally for reproductive rights. So I guess the best way to stay engaged, we can always use volunteers. We are self-funded, so any type of donations help. Any type of just coming out, being present, standing in solidarity. Even if you are not a woman, you are absolutely welcome to come stand shoulder to shoulder with us and get out there and let those people that do not have the full rights that others have, that you will stand for them, and we will stand together and support everyone's rights, whether you look like me or not. I will stand by you, and I will fight for you to have your rights outside of uniform this time, with a few hundred of my closest friends.
Thanks for that. And, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to get your take on, it seems like that there has been a certain point of view that suggests that, the Roe v. Wade decision by the Supreme Court and candidates such as Doug Mastriano that are running on a very hardcore anti-reproductive rights, platform is kind of awaken, a whole constituency that crosses, potential political lines. And as we saw in Kansas, a state that is very conservative, vote to preserve reproductive rights by, a double-digit margin. Again, in a state that's considered to be conservative and has majority Republican, office holders. In your experience, has this decision and the current political environment and candidates such as Doug Mastriano and others who take a very strong anti-reproductive stance, has that awakened the constituency? Are you seeing more people coming out and people that may have not come to women's marches in past years, coming out to fight on behalf of their rights. Has this ignited an opposition on the other side?
I believe it has. And kind of how I had spoken with that young lady that was a part of the opposition, that's part of why these rallies are important, is because we can get out there and in normal words say exactly what is happening. For instance, I know a lot of people think abortion is something that just bad people do, that just freely have sex with everybody, which abortions are for a number of different reasons. Even, for instance, an example that I used when speaking to somebody that was fully against abortion, I asked, so what will happen if this coworker, I asked, who is this coworker you don't like? What if they raped you and you got pregnant? Would you be okay carrying that child, raising that child, and living your life? And they were like, absolutely not. And right there, I could have just ended the conversation and let them, think about it a little bit. And I think the more people actually realize exactly what he is saying from the reports that I read, because obviously media was very limited within that rally, from the reports that I've read and heard about, these topics were not mentioned because they really can't say much about it except, I don't care what happens to you. I don't care if you will die if you don't get this abortion. They can't really say that and have the women necessarily agree with them, or even the men. I can't mention how many men I've known, politicians especially, that have gone up, impregnated a woman, and then gave her money and told her to have an abortion because they don't want these responsibilities. You know what? If the woman's fine with that and that's what she wants, I have no problem with it. Do you? However, for people to realize that he is taking an absolutely no nonsense or no wiggle room for abortion stance is something that kind of has been, if people hear that, they typically have some type of response to it. And these are even people that have been his supporters. So this is one subject that I've noticed he's kind of shied away from, because he realizes if he actually really says it out loud, people are just going to kind of jump ship from that.
All right. Well, Blair, I do thank you so much for spending some of your Monday with us to talk about, your organizing and to invite people to come out on Friday. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Thanks so much.
And that has been Blair from the Women's March here in Pittsburgh. They're a nonprofit volunteer run a chapter, and you can follow them or engage with them on the links we put into the chat. For all of our guests, we put the links and social media handles in the chat, so you can follow up with them directly to learn more about how they're engaging in this region and beyond. Like I said, the national is very local. All the conversations that are happening in the national sphere are happening right here in Pittsburgh, and that's why we wanted to bring these guests to you this evening. But as a reminder, if you're in Pennsylvania, you have until October 24th to register to vote. Please, please, please make sure you're registered to vote, especially if you've changed your name, you're new to the area. Even if you believe you are okay, and if you didn't vote in the last election, you want to double check, because of redistricting, your polling place may have changed. So just in case you have to do any type of updates, please go back and make sure you are registered to vote accordingly. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kahari to talk about some of the things we have coming up this weekend next.
Yeah, once again, it'll be a very busy week. This Thursday, we have Bun B coming to the Black Box. That'll be Thursday night at our wonderful new facility, formerly the Glitter Box Theater, the Black Box at 460 Melwood Avenue in Bloomfield. We'll have a conversation moderated by Jasiri X, talking about music, entrepreneurship, life, and all the perspective of legendary UGK MC Bun B. Then the following day, once again, we have Fridays on Deck. at Liberty Green, starting around 7 p.m. Music, food, etc. Which will then be followed on Saturday by People, Power, and Politics pop-up, which will be 12 to 4 at our usual location at Social Status. So a lot going on. And just really to kick off to a very, very, very busy fall. So yeah, that's the update of all the exciting events happening this week in the One Hood family.
All right. Well, I hope everyone had a great Monday. A reminder to please, if you are in the Allegheny, City of Pittsburgh region, to please make sure you're charging your cell phones, getting your lighters out and your candles, just in case this thunderstorm is a little difficult for us this weekend. We know it's just that time of the year where these storms are upon us. But want to remind people to please stay safe. Like back to school, it is stressful for some people to protect their mental health. We look forward to seeing you next Monday for another edition of the Power Hour. Please enjoy the rest of your weekend. And with that, have a good night.
Good night.